Welcome, Life Sciences. Welcome to a really exciting life science lesson today. I don't want to spend too much time talking because we've got a nice surprise that we're going to give you during this lesson today. So what are we looking at? Let's just quickly recap. I'm going to go onto the board. I'm going to go straight, to the section that we're going to look at. And we're starting to look at the human gaseous exchange. Now, last time we ended off with this whole concept of different organisms having different gaseous exchange. And then we ended off with the mammals. And we said that mammals are warm-blooded and they need lots and lots of oxygen, which means they need a really, really specialized system. And that's what we're going to look at today. So when I'm looking at the system that I'm going to look at, we're going to look at the mammals, right? And we're specifically going to look at how we humans, how are we going to bring oxygen in and carbon dioxide out? What does our system look like? And this is when we generally use the word, we say there are lungs. Our lungs are going to do that. They're only part of it, right? But they're going to be a big part. Okay, so first thing that you need to look at, what organs are going to be involved in bringing in air in. Now, guys, it's a very simple concept. Air needs to be brought into the system. Everything must be open. You cannot have any kind of thing in the way. Everything must be open. The air must flow, nice and freely. And that's what we need to look at when we look at the structure of the lungs. As soon as we get something stuck, that's when we choke, that's when we cough, right? That's when we sneeze, right? And that's when maybe we can get sick. So we need to make sure that nothing gets in the way of our system. So we're going to start off first. When you breathe in, it's got to go through the nose. And everybody's like, why? I'm going to show you. Okay, so why must air go in through the nose? Now I'm going to draw these little scary little things. Okay, these are hairs. Now, the reason why it must go through the nose is because, guys, you're going to have all these little hairs. And why do we have hairs? We want to trap any kind of dust or anything that we don't want into our tubes. Now, remember, air, we want air in. That's it. We don't want all other kinds of nonsenses and whatnot, because as soon as we do that, then the air getting in is a problem. And if we don't get in air, then we can't breathe. That's going to have a really serious problem. So we've got little hairs, right, that are going to trap the hair. Also, what have we got in the nose? Mucus. Right, a lot of you call it snot. Yes, you are quite right. But we've got a lot of mucus. Now, if you go to one of our points, what must a gaseous exchange system be? It must be moist. Why? Because the oxygen must dissolve, into a moist lining. But not only is it moist, what else does the mucus do? The mucus is also going to trap any kind of dust or any kind of foreign thing, and it's going to bring it out. So I'm going to have hairs, I'm going to have mucus, and if you notice the color here, it's red. The third thing that the nose must have is a lot of blood vessels. Now, guys, not for gaseous exchange. Gases do not exchange in your nose. Gases, the blood vessels are there to heat up your blood. Say, for example, it's a really cold day. You can see I'm wearing a scarf, so it probably is quite cold. And when I breathe in the air, when I breathe it in, it's ice cold, right? And we've got to keep a normal, constant body temperature. So as soon as I breathe in, I'm breathing in. Each time I breathe in, it's half a liter, okay? I've got to make sure that that air is nice and warm. That is why I breathe through my nose, and I definitely don't breathe through my mouth. Then when I go into, guys, have a look here. See those hairs again? That's them going nice and fast. They're getting all the dust out, nice mucus. These are found in the trachea. Now, the trachea is the pipe in which, we are going to, have a look and see. We've got quite a nice surprise for you, so stick around because you're actually going to see the real thing. Looking at the human exchange system, and obviously I don't have a human in front of me here, But we're going to look at some of the structures that make up what we call our gaseous exchange system. Sometimes we call it the respiratory system. Now, in my hand over here, I have an ox trachea, as we've said right in our introductory lesson a little bit earlier. And this trachea, we looked at the nose and how the nose, helps us with breathing. Now, I want you to have a look at this trachea. Now, remember, when we're looking at gaseous exchange, guys, we're talking about air. And air has to move freely. And that simply means hollow tubes. Look at this, all right? It must be hollow. Now, this is my trachea. Now, if you have a look over here, you'll see, I'm going to twist. The trachea is always in the front, right by my throat. But if you have a look at the back, I want to show you over here. Look what I've got attached. And I'm going to cut it. There's the esophagus. The esophagus runs all the way down the back over here of the trachea. And that you would have looked at when you looked at your digestive system. Now, when we look at the trachea, one of the things we look at, I don't know if you can see over here, you can see that there's bumps. Now, the trachea is like a plastic straw, not a paper straw. And what do I mean by that is there's a reason why there were plastic straws, because plastic straws stay open. And that's exactly the same concept that we need with our trachea. If we have a paper straw, we're going to close it. If we're going to have something that is not reinforced, the trachea is going to close. Now, I want to show you over here. I'm going to cut a little bit. Now, have a look. I'm cutting at the back. Now, why do you think I'm cutting at the back? I'm cutting at the back, guys, very simply because I can't cut in the front. Now, I want you to show over here. If I do this, this is hard. Look here, I can't move it. This is cartilage. In the front of my trachea, I have got C-shaped cartilaginous rings. And what do? Those C-shaped, look here, I can stick my finger all the way through. They keep the trachea nice and open. But at the back, I don't have these reinforcements. Why? Because what's at the back of it, I call it a little thief. And what is the little thief? The little thief is the esophagus. Why is the esophagus a thief? Guys, what happens when you swallow? What does this esophagus do? It expands. That bolus of food goes down. So guess what it says to the trachea? Okay, I need your space. So at the back here, I've got no reinforcements so that when I swallow, look here, I don't know if you can see it, I can push into, the space of the trachea. You really can't swallow and breathe at the same time, right? Because remember, your epiglottis is also closing, your trachea while you're doing it. There we go. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm cutting it open. I don't want to cut too much there. Let's cut the esophagus a bit. Guys, do you see this? I lovely call it the boerewors layer. That's connective tissue. All right, this is actually areolar connective tissue. It's the most abundant connective tissue in the body. And you see here, look what I'm doing. I can cut the back, but if I want to try, I can't cut the front. Can you see there? You can see these rings. There we go. There's a layer of cartilage, there's a layer of cartilage, and there is a layer of cartilage. So the trachea, a beautiful open windpipe that is going to go all the way down to the lungs. Now the trachea, when I get to the bottom here, it's in the lungs, it's too much, I can't really get to it. The trachea is going to branch into two open tubes again called the bronchi. Well, guys, wasn't that quite awesome? Okay, it was a huge, big trachea because it was from an ox, but you could see those C-shaped cartilaginous rings so nicely. And as I said to you, you've got to remember, the air must always be able to flow through freely. As soon as something gets stuck in there, you can't breathe. Right? That means you could actually suffocate. So we want the tubes to be nice and hollow. We want them to be reinforced. And we want air to be able to move nice and freely. Okay? So we went in through the nose, right? It goes to the back of our throat, which is the pharynx. Then it travels down the front here. Remember, the front was the trachea. The esophagus was at the back. And it goes all the way down, and then it must divide. And the reason it must divide, let me go to the next one, okay, is because we have two lungs. Now we're talking about the tubes here. So here's my trachea, and what will happen is the trachea divides into two bronchi. One bronchus, right, and two bronchi. So it must go into two because I have got two lungs. So the trachea is then going to divert. As you can see over here, there also is a little bit of reinforcement that's going to help it. So that's not going to be too bad. So what will then happen? Now it's like a tree. The bronchi have to get smaller and smaller and smaller. You want your lungs to be these balloons I'm going to show you just now. So you want these little tubes to get smaller and smaller and smaller. This is where the air needs to go because they're not going to do the work. You want them to go, and you're going to see now into the next thing. And what we call them is bronchioles. Now I'm sure you can imagine what happens if you've got a little bit of bacteria that attacks the lining. What do you get? Bronchitis. Right, that's what bronchitis is. When bacteria attacks it, it makes a lot of mucus, and you cough and you're sick. And that is what bronchitis is. So when these little tubes, first the bronchus, then the bronchiole, when they end up, now this, guys, this is the secret of the lungs. The lungs are these little round ball shaped. Imagine like grapes. And they are hollow inside, and they are called the alveoli. And this, you see, here's the tubes. And what they're going to do is these alveoli are small and thin. The air is going to come into here, and then you see they're wrapped with blood vessels. Gaseous exchange is going to occur. And what's going to happen is that is how we're going to get all the gases to the body. Okay. I think it's time for just a small little break. We're going to be right back. Welcome back, Life Sciences. I hope you had a little break there. I'm not going to spend too much time again because we're going to have a relook. We're going to go and visit that dissection yet again to have a look what the lungs look like. Okay, so we had a look what the tubes look like, the trachea, the bronchs, and they go into the alveoli. Now, what are these structures called the lungs? Okay, now first of all, we have two of them. You can see over here, and they fit into what is called the thoracic cavity. This is the thorax. That's what we call the thoracic cavity. And when we look at that, right, let me put here, thorax. And over here is an area called the mediastinum. And in between the lungs, we are going to find the heart. And as you can see there, right, they're beautifully protected by the ribs, the rib cage. There's intercostal muscles in between the two that are not only going to protect it, but are also going to help with the breathing. Right, underneath the lungs is this huge, big, smooth muscle called the diaphragm, and that is going to help us, right, when we breathe. So when we actually get to the process of breathing, we're going to have a look at that. Okay, now we're going to go back to the dissection. And I want you to notice, when we start dissecting, I want you to look at the lungs. Can you see that thin layer, the pleural layer that's around it? Okay, so when we dissect, have a look. Enjoy. Okay, guys, so now we're going to have a look at the lungs. Sure. Now, I'm going to try and pick up the ox lungs here. But it is huge and it's big. And if you can remember in our earlier segment, I looked at the concept of a large surface area. Guys, what do you think? Look here. I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to hold this up. And guess what? There's even a piece at the back over here. Look at the size of these things. All right. And this is just the outer surface. Remember, when we look at the inside, it's made up these millions and millions of hollow alveoli. So when I look at my lung, right, I've got two of them. Obviously, here we've also got two lungs. And if I was to describe the feel of it, I don't know if you can remember the squishy phase. This is exactly what the lungs feel like. I know this looks terrible, but they are so soft and they are squishy. If I have to bring the heart over here into it, just showing here, this is not soft and squishy. The heart is hard, all right? The muscle is hard. The lungs over here would actually make quite a nice little squishy toy, right? So the lungs they soft and they spongy, and that's what they have to be. Because when I want you to think of the lungs are these huge, big, giant balloons, and that's all they have to do. The lungs aren't made up of muscle. The lungs can't do much. They actually rely on things around them. Okay, so now I want to have a look here. We're going to just cut, right, the lungs. I want you to, first thing that we look at, you're going to see, let me turn over here. The lungs got this lovely little white sheen over it. Now if I use, there we go, look there. If I use my my little scalpel here, can you see that there's a nice, again, everybody always laughs at me, I call it the boerewors layer, but I'm cutting through a thin outer layer. I'm not cutting the lungs, all right? I want to pull them up. Let me see if I can show you. I've got this, right, this lovely white, clear, transparent outer layer. I'm trying to find where I can really find a nice one for you. Look at this. Hey, wow. This is just out of this world. Look at the blood, nice and fresh. Oh, there we go. Okay, so if I'm looking, let me go and see there. If we're looking at this layer, right, there we go. If I pull it up like this, there's this nice, clear layer that surrounds the lungs. Now, there we go. There's a little piece over here. Now, it's a very, very thin layer. I've cut it. It's called the pleural membrane. Now, the lungs, just like the heart, have got this very thin layer around them, because what happens is the lungs are going to inflate and deflate. They're going to move. So you don't want them to rub against things. You want them to have this lovely layer, and in between this layer is a very thin layer of moisture, because moisture is really important. What was one of the things that the lungs had to have? A good gaseous exchange surface. They have to be moist. Guys, when I do this, what do you notice? It's squishy. What does squishy mean? There's water, there's moistness. It's not something that is dry. So we have a large surface area, right? We have this moist layer on the outside and on the inside. Now I want you to have a look at here. Do you notice when I got to the heart, I'm going to show you the heart, that the heart had fat around it, okay? To protect it, to be a shock absorber. I want you to lift up the lungs over here. No fat on the lungs whatsoever. We can't have fat on the lungs, because what happens if we have fat on the lungs? Then we're going to stop the air from coming in. So the lungs are nice. As I said, they're big, they're spongy, large surface area. Now, if I cut into one of the lungs, I'm going to just show you. Let's see if we can, look at this, nice and thin. It's like flat. If I cut into it, look how nice and easy it is to cut into. Right, it's very easy. And when we cut into it, it actually looks, there's almost little hollow spaces. Let me try and find it. There we go. If we look at it, if we cut it open over here, right, it's not, look at that. I can stick my finger through it. It's not this big solid mass of muscle, right? We can see little bubbles. Look there, there's all nice and hollow. It's nice and easy to cut. As I said to you, there's absolutely no muscle whatsoever in the lungs. So what's going to happen? Remember, this lung is not this size. It's actually bigger than this, because what has happened to all the air? The air is, right, drawn out. Okay, the air has gone out of the lungs. So these are deflated lungs. So imagine if we can blow into this trachea over here, and we can put a whole lot of air into that. What's going to happen to these lungs? They're going to inflate. Okay, beautiful inflation. And that's what the lungs need to do. Bring air in, inflate, and then what must they do? Deflate. We can squish it all out, and all the carbon dioxide will go out. Wasn't that so cool? Right, I know you couldn't see it, but I was really enjoying it. It was squishy, it's nice and soft, and that's what the lungs are, right? Very nice and soft and moist. Guys, they don't have any muscles in, and that's why I could play around like a squishy toy. The lungs actually can't do anything, if I could say that. They haven't got any muscles, so they're going to rely on other things in order for them to inflate and deflate. Okay, so we said we've got, right, 2 lungs. And guys, they're not the same size. Over here, this is the right-hand side, this is the left-hand side, right? And what you will see, the left-hand side is slightly smaller because the heart is going to be in its place. And you'll see over here that the left-hand side has 2 lobes, whereas the right-hand side has 3. But what will be on the right-hand side over here is just underneath, pushing the right-hand side up, is going to be the liver. So both of them are kind of like being squashed by the different kinds of, right, by the different kinds of organs that are going to be there. Here is this beautiful diaphragm that we're going to talk about when we look at how we're going to breathe. Now, this is a very difficult concept that we look at, and these are the alveoli. And as I said to you, you've got to think of balloons. And the whole reason why is a balloon, right, what a balloon does, it inflates with air. So it's something that's flat. And when you looked at the dissection, the lung was actually flat, right? If I could, but it was just impossible because it's too big. If I blew into the trachea, the lung actually would have done that. Okay, so if I could pump, I could have pumped air into the trachea. It would have gone into the lungs. Now, you saw the alveoli yesterday, and they were lining flat. And if I had to fill it with air, it's like balloons, all right, inflating and inflating. And that's exactly what happens, all right? Your lungs are not plop in your body over here. We're constantly breathing in and out. We're inflating, slightly deflating, inflating, slightly deflating. And that is really important when it comes to the alveoli. They must be nice and thin, but they are hollow. And this is where gaseous exchange, etc., is going to occur. Right, so this is a diagram, guys, that you must become very, very familiar with. This is how we usually draw when we draw the alveoli. Have a look over here. 1 layer thick, gaseous exchange requirement. It's nice and moist, so it's thin, right? It's moist. There's a moist water vapor lining. It's got a good transport system. There's blood all around it. So it's thin and it's permeable and it's moist. Is it well protected? Yes, it is. Why? It has the rib cage. Remember, why is it so thin? It's that thin layer of squamous epithelium. Guys, remember, blood also, all right, the capillaries, very small, very thin, 1 layer. So when we're talking about the gaseous exchange system, always think structure versus function. How is it made that it's made so well, that it's able to do everything that it needs? Welcome, guys. Welcome back from that break that we have. As I said, most important, the break just gets the blood flowing and the oxygen in, all right, to help us think a little bit clearer. We're looking at the human gaseous exchange. And if you've been following the series, you would have seen that we had this awesome, all right, dissection where we had an ox and we could see the lungs, we could see the trachea, we could even see the esophagus and everything. It was really huge, it was really big. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So what we're looking at now is we're going to actually look at the process of how we are going to breathe. Okay, so guys, at the beginning, when we first started, we said to you, we very often use the word breathing to just right, how we bring oxygen and carbon dioxide in, right, how everything happens, the gaseous exchange. We sometimes even say cellular respiration is breathing, but we know that each of them have got, right, their own particular definition. So when we look at breathing, we're going to look at an actual physical process. Now, as I said to you, one concept that we really need to understand is that the lungs don't have any muscle. The lungs actually cannot breathe. Now, if we look at the process of breathing, if we look at the definition, right, it's a mechanical process. Now, a mechanical process involves muscles. Because what do muscles need to be able to do? They need to be able to relax and contract. Now, the tubes, yes, my trachea, my bronchus, and even my bronchioli, they have got muscles in, but not my lungs. My lungs don't have the alveoli that makes up the lungs. So what happens is when I'm going to breathe, anytime I bring oxygen in, I'm going to use the word inhalation. Sometimes the word inspiration is used, right? Or I'm going to get carbon dioxide out. That was expelled means, right? To go out. And that is going to be exit, get out, all right? Exhalation, or another word sometimes, expiration. So when I'm expired, all right, I've run out of time, same thing. Okay, so what we're going to look at is when we look at the process of breathing, we need to use muscles. Now, they don't have, right? The lungs don't have, but what they do have, they have a thoracic cavity. Now, if we have a look over here, where do we get muscles? I've got this beautiful big diaphragm, all right, at the bottom, covering, it's a muscle. In between each of the ribs, I have got intercostal muscles. Remember, when we looked at the skeleton, intercostal muscles. And both of those are going to be able, all right, to move. And them moving is going to be able for the breathing process to occur. Now, if we look at the process of inhalation, now I've brought this little model with me, and you guys can make this. It's really simple. All that it is I've got a 2-liter bottle, right, that I've cut in half, and this 2-liter bottle is going to represent your rib cage. I've got a straw over here, which is going to represent your trachea. Now, I only have one lung, because when I made two, well, actually, my kids in my class made these. When they did two, they were all like skew, and the one lung was like worked, and the other lung didn't. So we're going to do the one. And then at the bottom over here, they used a little bit of cling wrap to show that it's the diaphragm. Now, I want to show you, a balloon can't do anything. The balloon is the lungs. So I'm going to be reliant on the muscles working, okay? Because what are they going to do? Look at this diaphragm. My diaphragm is dome-shaped. When I'm relaxed. It's dome-shaped. How the lungs are going to inflate is they need to have space, and they don't want to be cramped, all right? So they want lots of space, all right, and they want little pressure. Two opposite things. More space, little pressure. And the rib cage and the diaphragm are going to do that. How do I do that? Look at my diaphragm, okay? It's pushed in, squeezed, and my ribs are down, squeezed, all right? But now I want to bring air in. So when the diaphragm contracts, it moves. Look at the balloon, okay? Look there. Can you have a look there? So when the diaphragm pulls down, what happens? Space. When my rib cage, when my intercostal ribs pull, my ribs go out, right, and down. So what have I made? Space. And when I've made space, my lungs can inflate. But the most important part is I've decreased the pressure. And as soon as I have a pressure gradient, high to low, where does air move? High to low pressure. The air gets drawn into Okay, look, when I pull it down, there we go. When I pull it down, the balloon is not doing the work. The air is doing the work. That is called inhalation. So my lungs don't do the work, the diaphragm and the intercostals do. Now have a look. Breathing in takes a lot of work. Now when I want to breathe out, what do? What do you do when you blow up a balloon and you want to get all the air out? I squish it. It's exactly what happens here. So now my diaphragm, breathe in, my diaphragm's out, my rib cage is wide, and I say air out. I just go. So I push my diaphragm back in. Oh, so I push. Pressure. Okay? And what else do I do? Lots of pressure, and I have, and I press in, and I've got a little bit of space. So I breathe out. So look there. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. So guys, those are the ones. What happens, all right, when you sneeze, when you cough, right, and when you shout? You need to actually use your abdominal muscles as well. And I actually read an article that said that men use their abdominal muscles to breathe as well. And that's why they get that nice little six-pack. Not fair. Don't like it. All right? So sometimes when we need to shout or sneeze or cough, the diaphragm, all right, and the ribs are not enough. And then, all right, our abdominals get sore. I don't know if you ever coughed a lot where you've been really sick. I don't know if you've ever felt it. Sometimes your tummy muscles, your abs, all right, can also get quite sore there. Okay, what I want you to have a look at, we're not going to go through the questions, but a very popular question that we have is using this model. Do you see over here? The following apparatus was set up. I'm going to go through it a bit with you. The following apparatus was set up in a lab. Study the sketch and then ask it. Okay, so basically, this is my homemade version. Very often, using this model, they can actually ask you questions. I went through a few past papers and whatnot, and I said, see that this is quite a popular question that they asked. Now, they said here, what parts of the human air passage do the labels A and B represent? Okay, so now remember, A, what was it? That's my straw, so that is going to be my trachea, right? And B, it's where it. So I don't have this on my model. As I said to you, mine was a little bit retarded. So my B was going to be B for bronchus, because those are the two that change. So my model was a little bit inaccurate, but that is not the end of the world. Right, now it says to you, explain what will happen to the balloons as the diaphragm is pulled downwards. Now, it just wants one single thing. So what will happen is when the diaphragm pulls downwards, it says explain. What will happen? The balloons will inflate. And why will they inflate? Because pressure has done what? Decreased. And what have we done? Space has increased. And what does this do? Air moves from the outside into the lungs. All right, so there we go. Nice little question. So using the whole process of inhalation, exhalation. The last question here is, how does the working model shown in the above, which is the one to the side, differ from the breathing system? Now, guys, there's the one thing here that the model cannot do, and this is the rib cage cannot move. Right, so when we get to my model, yes, it's a model, it does show it, but it really doesn't show what happened, right, to my rib cage. Okay, guys, I hope that if you have all these resources, maybe you can make one at home. It will help you to understand the process. Right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, Life Sciences. As I always say, that break is so important just to give you that little bit of blood flowing and just getting all the neurons working again. We're going to just have a quick little recap what we've done so far. Remember, we are looking at the gas exchange system. And we started off looking at what gas exchange was, what breathing was, what cellular respiration was, and each of them is a different term. So when it comes to the terminology, make sure when you do your summaries, when you do your notes, that you highlight there's a difference between cellular respiration, right? That's when we take in the glucose and release the energy, that's ATP. What is we need in cellular respiration? We need oxygen and we need to get rid of carbon dioxide. And that is where, right, the whole gas exchange is going to come in. So what is gaseous exchange? When I exchange or swap, right, carbon dioxide and oxygen. One will move in, one will move out. And then we looked at the whole process of breathing. What was breathing? Breathing is a mechanical All right, it's a mechanical process. And we had the little model that we showed you, that you could have made as well, that shows you how the muscles, not the lungs, the muscles in the thoracic cavity are going to enable the lungs to inflate. And remember that all of it goes to the structure of the gaseous exchange system. What does it look like? And remember, what do? We breathe through our nose, right? What do we have? We have hairs and we have all this mucus to trap the dust and these blood vessels to keep it nice and warm. And our nose, when you looked at the picture, our nose is really big. You have an idea that the nose is just this little area. There's so much towards it. Then we had that beautiful dissection when we looked at our trachea, right? Well, not ours, but the oxes. But it's a huge, big thing. Did you notice how hollow it was? Those C-shaped cartilaginous rings that are going to be able to keep it open, make sure the air flows in. Those tubes then split into the two bronchi, and what happens then? They get even smaller into the bronchioles, and they become those little balloon-like air sacs called the alveoli. Now, if you have been paying attention, I hope you have, every single time that we're looking at, we have focused on the one point, and that is the requirements for an efficient gaseous exchange system. So we looked at how plants, right, the dicotyledonous leaf, we looked at how they were able to gas exchange efficiently. We looked at the earthworm, we looked at the insect, and we even looked at a fish. All of those diversity, different organisms, one a plant, some animals, right? A fish lives in water. All of those had to have different ways in which they bring oxygen in and they have oxygen coming out. Well, the plants were different. Carbon dioxide must go in, right, for photosynthesis. So now what we're going to look is we're going to pay particular attention. We're going to go and have a look at how does the human gaseous exchange meet those requirements. This is also quite a popular question when you come to your questions that are asked. How is it? How is it built officially? Explain how is does gaseous exchange occur officially across the surface? So let's take a look. Right, as each time I've rushed a little bit through the terminology. Right, the reason being is we had that awesome dissection that we wanted to show you, and we really wanted you to get that experience of what a real live, lung, it wasn't living, it was dead, but the real thing actually looked at. Okay, so I'm going to go through each one of them now and look specifically how the human body, has that, how we the efficient gas exchange, how we meet the criteria. So let's take a look. Right, the very first one is a large surface area. Now, if the very first slide that I had, you won't believe it, but if I take your lungs and I iron them out, guys, I can actually cover a netball field. Your lungs can actually cover 70 square, meters of area. So they packed into the small little thorax. You think they're very small, but if I was to iron them out, if I was to lay them down flat, they would actually cover a whole netball field. And what that does is the alveoli do it. The alveoli, right, instead of just looking one ball like that, that is one alveoli, right? We are actually looking at a system that's made up of millions and millions and millions and millions. All of these alveoli packed together over here, right? And what that does is it increases the surface area. And what does it mean by increased surface area? Guys, very simply means I can get more oxygen into my lungs, and I can also get more carbon dioxide out. The thin and permeable, right, very important part here. Now, one of the things I often ask my class to do is I open the door and I tell them to go out. I said it's nice and easy. Or I close the door and I say to them, now get out. No, they can't get out. I said, but if you were to get out, could you get out? And they said, yes, they could, but it would take them such a long time. And that's exactly the point. How important is oxygen? Very important. So if I have got a structure that is really, really thick and the oxygen can't get in and out, I'm going to die, right? Because I need to get oxygen in and I need to get the carbon dioxide out. So when we look at this thin and permeable, this layer over here, and again, as I said to you, the alveoli, the diagram, is a really important layer. This layer is the alveoli over here. And as you can see, the reason I put this diagram in, it's only one layer thick. So only one layer thick makes it very thin. You will also notice that the blood is also one layer thick, which means that oxygen going out takes very quickly, but carbon dioxide carrying back in also takes quickly. Guys, efficient. What does efficient mean? Quickly, all right? Doing it nice and rapidly. There we go. The word rapid and easy. So when we look at this single layer, and permeable means that it can go through it easily. If I made the tissue really thick, it might be able to move through it, but it would take a really long time, and that I need oxygen. If I can't get oxygen, what's going to happen? Let's go back to cellular respiration. All right, what happens if we didn't have oxygen? Anaerobic respiration occurred, and what did I build up? Lactic acid. And when I don't have enough oxygen, I build up lactic acid. What does the lactic acid do? It interferes with my muscles. I get cramps, I get sore, and it doesn't work. So we want to make sure that the oxygen comes in as fast as it can. All right, the next one that we're going to look at is moist. Now, if I look at, I've said to you before, if you go to, lots of you have done that, you've gone to a window and you blow, right? And what comes out? Water. There's like water, and then you maybe make a little heart or a little flower in the water. That's exactly what's going to be in your lungs. There's water vapor. It's not water, guys. If water gets into your lungs, you drown. Okay, it's water vapor, so it's in the form of a gas. So again, if we look at this very important diagram of the alveoli, what you will see over here, right, is a very thin layer of moist air. And that moist air is really important. Why? Because oxygen needs to form a solution. What does the solution mean? Oxygen dissolves in the water. Remember one of our things as well when we looked at all chemical reactions must occur in water. Now, if you have a look as well, not only is the oxygen here going to dissolve in water, but you see when we looked at the lungs, can you remember they had a pleural layer? Type E-U-R-A-L. Okay, and what we had was a little bit of fluid over here. Now that fluid that surrounds the lungs helps us so no friction occurs, but it also gives us that moist layer, right? Because what happens there, it's also going to be moist. So when the oxygen moves out of the alveoli, guys, it's a moist Okay, again, it's going to be water vapor. And where's the oxygen eventually going to go? Into the blood. And the blood is going to be blood plasma. Okay, the next thing it needs to have is an efficient transport system. Now, what the transport system, we're going to call that's our blood system or our circulatory system when we looked at the heart and all of that. And what happens is, what transports the oxygen around the body and the carbon dioxide is going to be blood. Now, if you have a look here, these are millions of tiny alveoles, and they are covered by millions of tiny capillaries. And what can you see? The blue ones, they are bringing deoxygenated blood in, and the red ones are going to take, all right, that lovely fresh oxygen to the rest of the body. It doesn't help if you don't have a transport system. Okay, ventilation. What does ventilation mean? That actually is the process of breathing. And if you have a look over here, how do we breathe? We have these awesome muscles, the diaphragm, and we also have the intercostal muscles. And in doing that, our breathing mechanism, we can bring oxygen in and carbon dioxide can go out. All right, guys, so the last, all right, requirement is this whole concept of a well-protected, all right, gas exchange system. And we definitely have a well-protected one. As we saw with a few of the, all right, the other organisms, a leaf, right, not the earthworm didn't really have, and neither did the fish have a very well-protected one. But we have a well-protected gas exchange system. And what protects it is our rib cage. Now remember, our rib cage is made up of bones. And not only do we have bones, we also have intercostal muscle. And it's quite thick muscle. You know, remember, guys, when you eat ribs, those are the meat that you're going to be eating. So we have really well-protected ones. Now, also another thing we have to protect against is desiccation. And desiccation is drying out. So what you will find when you look at the lungs, as I said, when I played with the lungs for the dissection, it was so nice and squishy and moist. And that was because we keep it inside the body. When something is at the surface, it stands a much greater chance of evaporating, drying out. But our lungs are deep in our body cavity. Right? We have this lining, it's nice and moist, and it's going to be well protected. Okay, guys, well, I'm afraid that looks like it's it for today. I hope you had a really good time. Go and make that model, as I said to you at home. It shows how we breathe really nicely. It's really simple to make, and you can just find it from scraps, maybe lying around. Until next time, cheerio, bye.